Hey everyone, it's time for another installment in the Anyone Can Lie on an Affidavit series, which is exploring the affidavit John Paul Miller submitted in the Mica Francis probate case. Let's look at statements 3 through 14. In Statement 3, John Paul says that when Mica was in the mental hospital in 2017, he gathered wisdom on how to take care of her. He sent her an email making sure she knows how hard of a time all of this is on him, because why wouldn't it be all about John Paul? Let's say that Mica actually did have bipolar disorder. In this email, John Paul makes it sound like she could turn into a maniacal lunatic at any minute and try to eat the neighbor's cat on a regular basis. Here's one of the statements in the email that stood out to me. Quote, "They, meaning the medical professionals, told me about cases where people have ran outside naked, or where the bipolar patient thinks their spouse is crazy." End quote. Well, isn't that convenient that people who have bipolar disorder might think their spouse is the crazy one, and it could never be that the spouse is actually the one who's cuckoo nutter puffs? Watching John Paul constantly try to stay ahead of the narrative is getting boring. Another statement that stood out to me in that absolute trash email was when John Paul wrote this. Quote, "Financially, I was working with Redacted to get all of this taken care of, but you informed her about how much money you make, how the church pays our house, etc., when sending her our 2016 financials, and November 2017 is all she needs. I guess I'm just saying I hate feeling like we weren't on the same team." End quote. So, in other words, John Paul was lying his way into not having to pay the bill, but he thinks Mica messed it up by being honest about their finances. I have a feeling this was probably a problem a lot in their marriage, that John Paul wanted to do something sketchy and Mica was against it. I think the most bonkers part of this email is this, though. Sent from my iPhone. This document was almost 3 full pages of text, and I mean 8.5 by 11-inch sheets of paper. How many phone screens does that equal? Has John Paul never heard of a laptop or even an iPad? And isn't it just a coincidence that he uses "sent from my iPhone" at the end of his emails, just like the email Mica supposedly sent to Johnella Pauline that we talked about in the last video? John Paul also claims that he started going to support groups for family members of those with mental illness. But the email he provides as proof shows that someone had sent Mica the information about the groups. Whoever sent the email wrote, "Hello, here's the notice I was telling you about. Please don't give up. You are loved and cared about. Somehow this will straighten out. Hang in there." So is this person encouraging her not to give up on herself or to not give up on John Paul? John Paul includes another email that he states he wrote while she was in the hospital, but it's dated January 11th, 2018, so I'm unsure what hospital stay he's referring to. The entire email spectacularly showcases what a manipulative abuser says to someone he's supposed to love. John Paul tells Mica that it angers him that she wants to come off her medicine, and that it's selfish. He also states that he understands the lithium makes Mica lethargic and makes her gain weight, and we'll get back to that in just a minute. The entire email is so infuriating, and my heart breaks for Mica having to put up with the abuse. And this is something that John Paul offered as proof in a court case that he thought made him look good. In Statement 4, John Paul states that Mica's family fought to get her off her meds, and that Mica's sisters told her in November of 2022 that the lithium made her sluggish and gain weight and that she should stop it. But in the email that we just talked about that he wrote in 2018 and just used as proof in Statement 3, it was about Mica wanted to stop the lithium because it made her gain weight and made her lethargic. He can't even keep his lies straight between 2 statements on an affidavit. John Paul also states that even Mica's doctor said she shouldn't have a relationship with her sisters, but is there proof of that? Of course not. In Statement 5, John Paul states that he told Mica's sister Sierra that Mica had no access to guns at their house. But what he meant was there were guns at the house, but they were in the safe that supposedly only he had the combination to. He also told her that if Mica really wanted to commit suicide, there were other ways she could do it. This is the man who has been screaming and screaming and screaming the past few months about how he just wanted to stop her from getting a gun because he didn't want her to use it on herself. He made it clear that's the only way he could stop her from taking her own life, was to not let her buy a gun. But here he is admitting that if she really wanted to do it, she would have found other ways. In Statement 6, John Paul states that Mica wrote in her diary that when she was with him and on medication, she was happy, healthy, and enjoying life. What kind of attorney would allow him to bring up something in her diary or journals as fact or proof of any kind? That just means that Mica's family could have used anything else written in her journals as proof against John Paul. I'm beginning to think that Tom Winslow just really doesn't like John Paul, because this entire affidavit is a mess. Statements 7 through 10 are mostly about Mica and her medication, and it's just a regurgitation of what John Paul has been saying about her family not wanting to be on her meds, and he provides no proof of that. He also brings up the video of her in Africa, where she is telling the story of the gun jamming during a suicide attempt, but we still haven't seen that complete video. In Statement 11, that was dated January 20th, 2024, Mica supposedly sent a text to John Paul to tell him how great she thinks he is. But that text shows that it was sent via iCloud. Did you know that if you're signed into someone else's iCloud account, like say, for instance, I don't know, your spouse, you can text as though you're that person? Also, "I'm so lucky you even consider me" sounds a lot like what a narcissist thinks about themselves in a relationship, that the other person should be grateful they were even considered as a partner. Statements 12 and 13 are about a sweatshirt Mica designed with Mrs. Miller Established 2017 on the front of it, and about her wedding band tattoo. John Paul said both of these things happened in January. Do we know they did? No, because all we have is his word for it, which is worth less than chewed gum that was stuck on the underside of a city bus seat, but dropped off and got stuck to the bottom of someone's shoe and then was scraped off on a sewer grate. Statement 14, dated January 30th of 2024, John Paul claims that Mica asked him to be her life coach and that she bought a new Bible and had their names engraved on it. Sure, John Paul, you're everyone's first choice as a life coach because you are obviously winning at life. In the next affidavit analysis, I'll look at the events that led to Mica's involuntary commitment to the mental hospital. I'll be back soon.